The readings are certainly an invitation, if not requiring that this morning I preach about vocations. The purpose of my preaching is going to be hopefully to inspire and support you in living your own vocation, encouraging the vocations in your family members and friends, especially perhaps your young children who are haven't even perhaps started discerning their own vocation, though perhaps they have. I know my own nephew Tommy marches around the yard. He's 4. Even when he was 2, he marches around the yard. He thinks he's celebrating Mass. It's fantastic. You know, it's not all that's necessary for a vocation to priesthood, but certainly we see it. Kids playing Mass, kids playing family with dolls and all that. And so I want to encourage everyone in their vocations, but it's not going to be in the form of a lecture and telling you what to do as much it will be in the way of storytelling. And this will be for a combination of reasons, and I think at least one of them will become more evident to you as the story unfolds. It's a beautiful story, one I hope you may take some time to explore on your own. It even has elements of a love story. So let's get to that story. Once upon a time, in fact, in the spring of 1851, Peter Paul Tolton, a Catholic young man, married 18-year-old Martha Jane Chisley, also Catholic, at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Bush Creek, Missouri. Peter met and had fallen in love with Martha under unusual circumstances. The day Peter met his future spouse, she was calling for help, attempting to save the life of a slave boy who had collapsed. Though the boy died, Peter was deeply moved by the compassion Martha had shown for the slave, and this led to their marriage. It was a grace that Peter was able to experience and recognize the great virtue in this young woman previously unknown to him, and then chose to court her as a potential wife. However, this would not be a trivial matter. It would not be trivial for this seemingly chance encounter to result in marriage. You see, Peter was a slave and consequently did not enjoy the freedom to pursue Martha, also a slave, without the permission and significant cooperation of others. 3 years later, after their Catholic marriage, Martha gave birth to a son who would be given the name of Augustine after Martha's own father and the great African saint and father of the church, St. Augustine. Unfortunately, life for the young Tolton family was very hard, and over the first few years of Augustine's life, it became evident to many, including Augustine's father Peter, that slavery in the United States would only end as the result of a civil war, as the result of an armed conflict. The law had revealed over the previous few years that it was not going to change that way. It seems that Peter, the father of 3 young children, simply could not bear the thought of his own children being sentenced to cruel lives of slavery like the one that he had known, lives without citizenship, life without rights, lives without education. And so Peter had to make a difficult decision. Not only did that include running away, so to speak, as absurd as it is when we really think about it, escaping from slavery, but like all aspiring soldiers, he needed to leave behind his wife and young children. He would, in an attempt to free his family from the cruel fate of slavery, he would run away and attempt to join the Union Army. Unfortunately, Peter would never see his family again. His name would later appear on the Union Army's official list of Civil War casualties, which I believe included about 63,000 African Americans. As brave as Peter Tolton was, his widow, Martha, was extraordinary, possessed significant courage and fortitude as well. She too escaped slavery sometime after her husband, making a run for Quincy, Illinois, with her 3 young children. I think her youngest, Anna, was just 20 months old when she made this escape. Not only was this a 40-mile hike from where they were in Missouri to potential freedom in Illinois, there was a really big river at the midpoint of this journey called the Mississippi. Amazingly, Martha, who presumably had seldom, if ever, been in a boat before, managed to acquire a very poorly maintained rowboat and row herself and her children across the Mississippi River to safety. She and the children were able to reach Quincy, Illinois, a city of approximately 25,000 souls, 1 or 2% of which were African Americans living in their own neighborhood. Some of them, of course, also had escaped from slavery. Though much preferable to slavery, life for Martha, Augustine, and the 2 other children was not easy. Martha and her 2 young boys worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week in a cigar factory. There were, however, 3 months of layoffs during the winter, which, though not ideal in certain respects, had a real sort of silver lining. The 3 months off in the winter allowed Augustine to pursue formal education. Of course, and unfortunately, in this he met considerable resistance, racism at both a local Catholic and a local public school, and these first 2 attempts resulted in failure as a consequence of that horrible opposition. However, a Catholic priest who met Augustine when he was 14 years old insisted that Augustine attend his own St. Lawrence school, despite the same kind of opposition manifest in Augustine's 2 earlier attempts at education. This priest was we would say he had a strong personality, is what we call it. He had a strong personality and was Irish, right from Ireland, and he, despite opposition of many in the town, he was a good old-fashioned priest. He made it happen. After 2 years of this education in 1870, the same priest discussed with Augustine the possibility that he might have a vocation to the priesthood. In this, Augustine met another significant difficulty. In 1870, there were zero African American Catholic priests in the United States of America. Multiple Catholic organizations, whether seminaries, dioceses, or religious communities, simply refused to sponsor and admit Augustine to seminary. There was just no one who was very much desiring to be the first person to do this. And for me as a baseball fan, I think I certainly have it backwards, but I think of this young Augustine as the Jackie Robinson of Catholic clergy, right? No one wanted to be the first one to do it. There was just way too much, not only just overt racism, but even fear among those with softer hearts. Only with the help of the local priests of Quincy, Illinois, was Augustine able to prepare informally for this very much hopes for future seminary studies. Of course, some of that prep required was the consequence of the fact that all of his studies, all of the books were in Latin. So at the very least, he needed to know Latin, which is no small task, which required no small effort. Finally, Augustine, with again the influence of this handful of good priests in Quincy, Illinois, he was admitted to a seminary in Rome for missionary priests. For his 6 years of seminary studies, Augustine and everyone else interested in his circumstances assumes that he would be sent to the missions in Africa, perhaps Asia, but most likely Africa. Certainly not the United States of America, which 16 years later still had no African American priests. In an extraordinary and amazing turn of events, the day before his ordination to priesthood at St. John Lateran Basilica Cathedral in Rome, the Pope's Cathedral, St. John Lateran, the cardinal with authority over the missionary priests told the soon-to-be Father Augustine Tolton that he would not be serving in Africa, but rather in his home diocese in Illinois. Though perhaps difficult for us to understand, this Father Tolton experienced this as a bit of a disappointment. His heart had been set on Africa, and so it was there was disappointment that accompanied this radical decision on the part of the cardinal in authority. However, I suspect that for his mother, Martha, this was a tremendous gift, something that, though I have no evidence for, undoubtedly I think she must have prayed for. Martha, a widow who, because of her slavery, had been separated from her parents and siblings at just 16 years of age and had buried her 10-year-old son, Charlie. She would now be reunited with Augustine, Father Augustine. Martha would be a tremendous support to Father Tolton during his priesthood, living in his residence and caring not only for him, but for his parishioners, so much so that they called her Mother Tolton. Father Tolton went on to serve as a parish priest in both Quincy and Chicago until his death, but unfortunately that was only 11 years. He faced many difficulties, of course, racism generally, and unfortunately the racism and jealousy of at least one powerful priest in Quincy. However, in the interest of time, I won't go into all of those difficulties. Father Tolton died at the age of just 43 years old, a victim of heat stroke and organ failure. He was declared venerable by Pope Francis on June 11th of 2019. So Venerable Father Augustine Tolton is on that very special path to canonization, and God willing, he will be canonized soon. Like the heroic Toltons, Peter, Martha and the son to whom they passed on their Catholic faith, Venerable Father Augustine Tolton, we too can live our God-given vocations despite the difficulties each of us faces in these unusual times. And they are unusual. There's so many challenges for all of us in whatever our vocations are. I suspect the challenges will only increase, but certainly nothing like the challenges that any of the Toltons faced in living their vocations, whether it was to marriage or to priesthood. This will require true and dedicated prayer, enduring sometime significant sufferings for the love of Jesus, and a renewed daily desire to do not our own will, but God's will. May we support one another, especially our family members and friends, in our efforts to faithfully live the vocation God has bestowed upon each of us.